Your Honor, look at her. She can't even afford a sandwich, let alone the administration of an estate. She is a drain on society, a beggar trying to steal from the grieving widow." Those were the exact words Marcus Sterling used on November 14th, 2024, in the Superior Court of New York. He pointed a manicured finger at Wyatt Vance, mocking her torn shoes and her $12 bank balance. The entire courtroom laughed. His client, the wealthy widow Lydia Blackwood, smirked. They thought the victory was already won. They thought Wyatt was just dirt on their designer shoes. But they didn't check the timestamp on the document the judge was about to open. 10 minutes later, the laughter didn't just stop. It died. Because the man they buried wasn't just a millionaire, he was the silent owner of half the city, and he had left a trap door in his will, specifically designed for the moment someone called his daughter poor. The rain in Manhattan that morning was unrelenting. It was the kind of freezing, grey downpour that soaked through cheap fabric in seconds, chilling you to the bone. Wyatt Vance knew that chill well. Standing outside the massive granite pillars of the Southern District Courthouse, she pulled her coat tighter. It was a wool blend she'd found at a Goodwill in the Bronx 3 years ago. The hem was fraying, and it smelled faintly of damp dog, but it was the only shield she had against the biting wind. She checked her reflection in the glass of the revolving doors. Her hair, a mousy brown, was pulled back in a severe bun to hide the fact that she hadn't been able to afford conditioner in a month. Her eyes were red-rimmed, not just from grief, but from exhaustion. She had worked a double shift at the diner the night before, just to afford the subway fare and a coffee to keep her awake. "You can do this, Elle," she whispered to herself. "For Dad." Inside courtroom 304, the atmosphere was suffocatingly warm and smelled of expensive cologne and old leather. This was the arena of the elite, and Wyatt was the gladiator with no armor. On the left side of the aisle sat the vultures. That was what her father, Silas, had called them in his final, delirious days. There was Lydia Blackwood, Silas's second wife. She was wearing a custom-tailored black Chanel suit that probably cost more than Wyatt made in a year. Her blonde hair was a perfect, immobile helmet. She wasn't crying. She was checking her watch, a Cartier tank encrusted with diamonds. Next to her sat Marcus Sterling. If a shark could wear a suit, it would look like Marcus. He was a partner at Sterling, Holloway and Partners, one of the most ruthless family law firms in the city. He was handsome in a cruel, sharp-edged way. He was currently scrolling through his iPad, looking bored. And behind them, the entourage, financial advisors from Goldman & Sachs, real estate agents from Sotheby's, and distant cousins Wyatt hadn't seen in 20 years. They were all there for the carving of the turkey. Silas Blackwood had been known as the eccentric antique dealer with a comfortable nest egg. They expected a few $1 million, maybe a property in the Hamptons, enough to fight over. Wyatt walked to the plaintiff's table and sat down alone. She had no lawyer. Legal aid had told her that probate cases regarding potentially high-value estates were outside their jurisdiction. She had tried to hire a junior attorney, but Marcus Sterling had quietly threatened to bury anyone who took her case in paperwork, so deep they'd never see sunlight again. So, she sat alone. A plastic bag containing her birth certificate and a handwritten letter from her father sat on the table. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Arthur P. Henderson swept into the room. He was a man known for his impatience with theatrics and his love for a quick lunch break. He peered over his spectacles, looking from the team of high-powered lawyers on the left to the shivering girl in the wet coat on the right. "Case number 4902B, the judge grumbled. "The estate of Silas Blackwood. Let's get this over with. I have a 1 p.m. tea time." Marcus Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket with a confident snap. "Ready, Your Honor. Representing Mrs. Lydia Blackwood, the sole surviving spouse and rightful executor." "And you?" The judge looked at Wyatt. Wyatt stood up, her knees shaking. "Wyatt Vance, Your Honor. The deceased was my father. I am representing myself." A snicker rippled through the gallery. Marcus didn't even look at her. He just smiled at the court reporter. The game had begun, and they were playing by rules Wyatt didn't even understand. The first hour was a massacre. Marcus Sterling didn't just want to win. He wanted to destroy Wyatt's credibility so thoroughly that she would be afraid to walk down a street in New York ever again. This was about more than money. It was personal. Years ago, before Silas had married Lydia, Wyatt had been the one to handle her father's bookkeeping. She knew where the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. Lydia wanted her silenced. "Your Honor," Marcus began, pacing the floor with the grace of a predator. "We are here to discuss the competency of the potential administrator of this estate. The law states that an administrator must be of sound financial standing and moral character." He picked up a piece of paper, holding it delicately between two fingers, as if it were soiled. "Miss Vance?" Marcus turned to her, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Is it true that you were evicted from your apartment in Queens on August 14th of this year?" Wyatt gripped the edge of the table. "My father was sick. I missed shifts to take care of him at the hospice. I fell behind on rent." "So you admit financial irresponsibility?" Marcus cut her off. "It wasn't irresponsibility, it was—" "Is it also true," Marcus boomed, drowning her out, "that your current credit score is 420, that you have 3 maxed-out credit cards, and that you currently have—" He glanced at the paper, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "$12.43 in your checking account at Chase Bank?" The courtroom gasped. Wyatt felt the heat rise in her cheeks. It felt like her skin was burning off. "I spent everything on his medical bills," Wyatt cried out, her voice cracking. "Lydia wouldn't pay for the private nurse. She left him to rot in the state facility. I used my savings to get him into a private room." "Objection," Marcus roared. "Hearsay and emotional manipulation. Your Honor, look at her." Marcus turned to the gallery, spreading his arms wide. This was the moment the hook of the story hinges on. "She is destitute, Your Honor. She is desperate. A woman in her position sees an estate not as a responsibility, but as a lottery ticket. She can't even afford a sandwich for lunch today, let alone the legal counsel required to manage a portfolio of antiques. Handing the Blackwood estate to her would be like handing a machine gun to a toddler. She is poor, Your Honor, and in matters of finance, poverty is a conflict of interest." Lydia Blackwood let out a delicate, audible sigh. "It's just so sad," she whispered, loud enough for the mic to pick up. "Silas would be so embarrassed by her state." The judge looked at Wyatt. His expression wasn't kind, it was pitying. And in court, pity is worse than hate. Pity means you've already lost. "Ms. Vance," Judge Henderson said, taking off his glasses, "Mr. Sterling raises valid points regarding the administration bonds. If you have no assets, you cannot be bonded. If you cannot be bonded, you cannot be the executor. It is a matter of law." "But I'm his daughter," Wyatt pleaded. "He wrote me a letter. He told me to come here." "A letter is not a will, Ms. Vance," the judge sighed. "Unless you can prove financial stability in the next 5 minutes, I am inclined to grant administration to Mrs. Blackwood." Marcus sat down, winking at Lydia. "Done," he mouthed. Wyatt slumped in her chair. She looked at the plastic bag on the table. The letter inside was old, written on yellow legal pad paper. Silas had given it to her 3 days before he died. He couldn't speak then, but he had squeezed her hand so hard it hurt. "Trust the process, Ellie," he had written. "Wait for the suit." She didn't know what that meant. She thought he was hallucinating. "I am ruling in favor of the defense." Judge Henderson raised his gavel. The wooden hammer was inches from the striking block. Creak. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They were pushed wide with a force that commanded silence. Everyone turned. Walking down the center aisle was a man who looked like he owned the weather. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that made Marcus Sterling's outfit look like a Halloween costume. He carried a briefcase made of crocodile skin, and behind him trailed 3 assistants, each carrying towering stacks of files. "I object to this ruling," the man said. His voice was calm, baritone, and carried to every corner of the room without a microphone. "Who are you?" Judge Henderson demanded, annoyed at the interruption. "This is a closed hearing." The man stopped at the gate. He looked at Marcus Sterling with the kind of dismissal one gives to a buzzing fly. Then he looked at Wyatt, and for the first time, his face softened into a bow of respect. "My name is Julian Thorne," the stranger said, "senior partner at Thorne, Winstrup and Gable, of London and Zurich." A murmur went through the room. Thorne, Winstrup and Gable wasn't just a law firm. It was the firm that handled the British royal family's private investments. It was the firm that managed sovereign wealth funds. They didn't do probate court in New York. "I am here," Julian Thorne continued, placing his briefcase on Wyatt's table, "representing the true estate of Silas Blackwood. And I have the last will and testament right here. It was executed 48 hours before his death, under the supervision of a court-appointed psychiatrist to ensure sanity." Marcus Sterling stood up, his face pale. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. Silas Blackwood was an antique dealer. He didn't have international counsel." Julian Thorne turned to Marcus. The smile he gave was terrifying. "Mr. Sterling," Thorne said softly, "Silas Blackwood wasn't an antique dealer. He was the majority shareholder of the Titanium Logistics Group, the silent owner of the Vanguard Banking Consortium, and the man who owned the land this courthouse is currently built on." Thorne turned to the judge. "The assets are not valued at $2 million, Your Honor. The current valuation of the Blackwood Trust, of which this will dispose, is approximately $480 billion. With real estate holdings, it pushes toward the trillion mark over the next decade." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the rain hitting the windows. Wyatt stared at the stranger. Her father? The man who clipped coupons for tuna cans? And, Thorne added, looking directly at Lydia Blackwood, who had gone the color of ash. "There is a specific clause regarding the treatment of his daughter, Wyatt. It is quite specific about the consequences of mocking her financial status." Thorne opened the briefcase. The sound of the latches clicking open sounded like gunshots. "Shall I read it?" Judge Henderson was a man who had seen everything. He had presided over the divorce of a pop star and a tech mogul. He had sentenced mob bosses. But as he took the heavy, leather-bound document from Julian Thorne's hands, his hands actually trembled. He adjusted his spectacles, reading the first page. Then he flipped to the second, then the third. His eyes widened with every paragraph. He looked up at the gallery, then at the ragged figure of Wyatt, and finally at the smug face of Marcus Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice surprisingly quiet, "you moved to dismiss Ms. Vance based on her lack of assets to bond for the estate." "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus said, though his confidence was wavering. "Standard procedure." "There is nothing standard about this," Judge Henderson said. He looked at the court reporter. "Seal the courtroom. No one leaves. Bailiff, disable the Wi-Fi. If a word of this leaks before we are done, I will hold everyone in this room in contempt." Panic flickered in Lydia Blackwood's eyes. She leaned toward Marcus. "What is going on? Why is he reading it like that?" "It's a bluff," Marcus whispered, sweating. "It has to be." Judge Henderson cleared his throat. "The document presented by Mr. Thorne is valid. It supersedes the previous will, filed in 2019. It outlines the assets of Silas Blackwood." The judge looked directly at Wyatt. "Miss Vance, were you aware that your father, through a series of shell companies, starting with Oberon Holdings, was the sole proprietor of the North Atlantic fiber optic cable network?" Wyatt blinked, confused. He fixed radios. He liked electronics. "He didn't fix them, Ms. Vance. He built the infrastructure that carries 40% of the internet traffic between Europe and America," Thorne interjected smoothly. "He also owned the patent for the lithium stabilization process used in every electric vehicle battery on the market today. The royalties alone from that patent generate approximately $12 million a day." Lydia Blackwood let out a strangled gasp. "That's impossible. We lived in a townhouse in Brooklyn. He drove a 2005 Ford Focus." Thorne turned to Lydia, his expression icy. "He drove a Ford Focus because he despised waste. He lived in Brooklyn because he wanted to be near the people, not hidden away in a tower. He tested you, Mrs. Blackwood. For 10 years of marriage, he watched you. He gave you a generous allowance, a comfortable life. He wanted to see if you would love him, or if you were just waiting for a payout." Thorne paused, letting the silence stretch. "He found his answer when he got sick. When you moved him to a state facility to save money on his care, despite having access to his joint checking account, you failed the test." "I was being prudent," Lydia screeched, standing up. "He was dying. Why waste money?" "Sit down, Mrs. Blackwood," the judge roared. Thorne continued. "The total valuation of the estate, including the Blackwood Sovereign Land Trust, which owns 6 city blocks in Manhattan, including the ground lease of this very courthouse, is verified at $980 billion USD. It is the largest private estate in American history." Marcus Sterling slumped into his chair. He had just mocked the daughter of the richest man in America for having $12. He looked at his own shoes, wishing he could dissolve into the floor. "However," Thorne said, raising a finger, "Silas knew that revealing this money would bring out the sharks. He knew that if he died, you, Mrs. Blackwood, and your lawyers would try to crush Wyatt. He knew you would try to use her poverty, a poverty she endured because she spent her own meager savings to save his life, against her." Thorne walked over to the court reporter. "Madam Reporter," Thorne said gently, "could you please read back the statement made by Mr. Marcus Sterling exactly 4 minutes ago? The one regarding Miss Vance's financial status?" The reporter nodded, finding the spot on her scroll. Her voice shook slightly as she read. "She is destitute, Your Honor. She can't even afford a sandwich for lunch today. Handing the Blackwood estate to her would be like handing a machine gun to a toddler. She is poor, Your Honor, and in matters of finance, poverty is a conflict of interest." Thorne smiled. It was a wolf's smile. "Thank you. Now, Your Honor, if you would please turn to page 114, clause 7, subsection B. It is titled, 'The Protocol of Dignity.'" Judge Henderson turned the pages. The room was so silent you could hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights. When the judge found the clause, he let out a short, disbelief-filled laugh. "You have got to be kidding me," the judge muttered. "Read it aloud, please, Your Honor," Thorne requested. The judge took a breath. Clause 7, subsection B. "I, Silas Blackwood, being of sound mind, anticipate that upon my death, my daughter Wyatt will be targeted. I anticipate that my wife, Lydia, and her legal counsel will attempt to discredit Wyatt based on her lack of material wealth. Wealth that I intentionally withheld from her to teach her the value of struggle, a lesson Lydia never learned. Lydia was shaking her head violently. No. No. The judge continued reading. Therefore, let this be the condition of inheritance. If, during the probate hearing, any party challenging Wyatt's administration cites her poverty, her lack of funds, or her social standing as a reason for her disqualification, that party shall be immediately and irrevocably disinherited. The judge looked up, his eyes locking on Marcus Sterling. Furthermore, the judge read on, his voice booming now, if legal counsel is used to deliver this insult, the cost of that insult shall be levied against the challenging party's share. Since the insult has been recorded, Mrs. Lydia Blackwood is hereby stripped of her marital share, her stipend, and her claim to any Blackwood assets. She leaves this marriage as she entered it, with nothing. No, Lydia screamed. She lunged at Marcus, clawing at his face. You idiot! You arrogant idiot! You said we had to attack her character. You said she was weak. Get off me! Marcus shouted, shoving her away. The bailiffs rushed forward, restraining Lydia, who was now sobbing hysterically, her Chanel suit rumpled. It gets worse, Thorne said, cutting through the chaos. Read the footnote, Your Honor. The judge squinted. Footnote C. Regarding the attorney who delivers the insult, I, Silas Blackwood, hold the mortgage on the commercial tower located at 40 Wall Street, currently leased to the firm Sterling, Halloway and Partners. Marcus froze. His face went grey. If a partner of this firm insults my daughter, the lease is immediately terminated for conduct violation. The firm has 24 hours to vacate the premises. Thorne looked at his watch. It is now 11:15 a.m. Mr. Sterling, you might want to call your senior partners. You have until 11:15 a.m. tomorrow to move your desks, your files and your servers out of the building. I believe it's raining, so you might want to start now. Marcus Sterling didn't move. He couldn't. His career, his firm, his reputation, everything was incinerated in seconds. He looked at Wyatt. Wyatt sat there, her hand covering her mouth. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She was crying. He knew, she whispered. He knew they would do this. Thorne walked over to her. He knelt down, ignoring the dirt on the floor, so he was eye level with her. He knew everything, Wyatt. He watched you work double shifts. He watched you buy him the expensive medicine instead of buying yourself dinner. He told me that you were the only person in the world who loved Silas the man, not Silas the checkbook. That is why he gave you the world. Thorne stood up and turned to the judge. The estate passes entirely to Wyatt Vance. There are no other beneficiaries. Lydia Blackwood is disinherited by her own lawyer's arrogance. So ordered. Judge Henderson slammed the gavel down. The sound was like a gunshot ending a war. But as the bailiffs dragged a screaming Lydia out of the courtroom, I was his wife. I deserve half. And as Marcus Sterling ran out of the room, desperately dialing his phone, Julian Thorne didn't relax. He leaned in close to Wyatt. Ms. Vance, he said, his voice dropping to a serious whisper. Do not celebrate yet. The easy part is over. Wyatt looked up, wiping her tears. The easy part? I just inherited $1 trillion. Yes, Thorne said grimly, and that puts a target on your back the size of Manhattan. Silas didn't just leave you money. He left you a seat at the table of the Order of High Finance. And the other members, they don't like new blood. Thorne clicked his briefcase shut. We need to leave. Now. There is a secure car waiting in the underground garage. We cannot use the front door." "Why?" Wyatt asked, clutching her father's letter. "Because," Thorne said, glancing at the doors where the press was likely already gathering, "the people your father outsmarted to build this fortune, they aren't lawyers like Mr. Sterling. They are men who make presidents disappear. And they just found out the money they thought was lost is now in the hands of a 22-year-old girl." The ride from the courthouse was a blur. The car wasn't just a limousine. It was a tank disguised as a Mercedes Maybach. The glass was an inch thick. Wyatt sat in the back, the heated leather seat feeling alien against her damp coat. Thorne sat opposite her, typing furiously on a tablet. "We are going to the penthouse at the Steinway Tower," Thorne said without looking up. "It was your father's primary command center. No one knows it exists except me and the head of his security." "Who is the head of security?" Wyatt asked, her voice trembling. She looked out the window. The rain was blurring the city lights. An hour ago she was worrying about subway fare. Now she was in a convoy. "His name is Kalen," Thorne said. "He's an ex-operative for the SAS. He's loyal to the paycheck, but more importantly, he was loyal to Silas. He'll be loyal to you, as long as you show strength." "Strength?" Wyatt laughed bitterly. "Mr. Thorne, look at me. I'm wearing shoes with holes in them. I'm not strong." Thorne stopped typing. He looked at her with intense, piercing eyes. "Strength isn't about shoes, Wyatt. You stood up in that courtroom alone against a team of sharks. You took care of a dying man for 2 years without asking for a dime. That is strength. But now, you need a different kind." The car swerved suddenly. "Hold on," the driver said. His voice was tense. "What is it?" Thorne snapped. "Black SUV, no plates. It's been tailing us since Canal Street." Wyatt's heart hammered against her ribs. "Is it Lydia?" "Lydia is crying in a bathroom somewhere," Thorne said dismissively. "This is something else." The driver accelerated. The heavy car surged forward with surprising speed, weaving through the midday traffic. The black SUV behind them matched the move, aggressive and sharp. "They're trying to box us in," the driver shouted. "Kalen," Thorne said into his phone, "we have a situation. Sector 4. Get the team ready." Suddenly the SUV behind them roared, pulling up alongside. The window rolled down. Wyatt saw a man in a ski mask, raising something black and metallic. "Get down!" Thorne yelled, lunging across the car to push Wyatt's head below the window line. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Bullets impacted the glass, the reinforced window, spider-webbed but didn't shatter. The sound was deafening inside the sealed cabin. "Ram them!" Thorne ordered. The driver yanked the wheel to the right. The heavy Maybach slammed into the side of the SUV with the force of a wrecking ball. Metal screeched against metal. The lighter SUV lost traction on the wet asphalt, spinning out of control and crashing into a parked delivery truck. The Maybach didn't stop. It roared away, turning a sharp corner into an underground ramp that opened automatically as they approached. They plunged into darkness, the steel gate slamming shut behind them. Silence returned to the car. Wyatt was hyperventilating, curled in a ball on the floor. "Welcome to your new life, Miss Vance," Thorne said, adjusting his suit jacket as if nothing had happened. He offered a hand to help her up. "Someone is very unhappy about the reading of that will." "Who?" Wyatt gasped. "Who was that?" "Your father had 3 business partners in the beginning," Thorne explained, as the car came to a halt in a pristine, white underground garage. "Silas was the brains. The other 2, they were the muscle. He bought them out years ago, but they always believed he cheated them. They are the Vittorio brothers, and if they know Silas is dead, they are coming for the keys to the kingdom." The car doors opened. A wall of men in black tactical gear stood waiting. In the center of them was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow and cold blue eyes. "Package secure?" the man asked. "Secure, Cailan," Thorne said. "Meet your new boss, Wyatt Vance." Cailan looked at Wyatt. He looked at her frayed coat, her terrified eyes, and her messy bun. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. "She looks like she's going to break," Cailan said bluntly. Wyatt felt a spark of anger. It was a small spark, but it was there. She had just been shot at. She had just been humiliated in court. And now this hired gun was judging her? She stepped out of the car. She pulled her ragged coat tight, stood up as straight as her spine would allow, and looked Cailan in the eye. "I didn't break when my father died in my arms," Wyatt said, her voice shaking but loud. "I didn't break when they laughed at me in court, and I won't break because of you. So, are you going to get me inside, or are you going to stand there and critique my fashion?" Cailan stared at her for a long second. Then, a corner of his mouth twitched. "Right this way, Mom," he said, stepping aside. They entered the private elevator. Thorne pressed the button for the 90th floor. "First order of business," Thorne said. "We need to fix your image. You cannot rule an empire looking like a victim. Tonight, there is a gala at the Met. The entire board of the Vanguard Consortium will be there. You are going to attend." "Tonight?" Wyatt exclaimed. "I almost died 5 minutes ago." "Exactly," Thorne said. "Which is why you must be seen tonight, alive, untouchable, and looking like $1 trillion. If you hide, the Vittorio brothers smell fair. If you walk into that gala like a queen, they will hesitate, and hesitation gives us time." The elevator doors opened. The penthouse was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. But standing in the middle of the room was a team of people, stylists, hairdressers, tailors. "Make her dangerous," Thorne ordered the team. The penthouse was a flurry of activity, but Wyatt stood in the center of it like a statue, staring at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. She didn't recognize herself. The mousy brown hair that had been stuffed into a messy bun for years was now a cascading waterfall of rich chestnut waves, glossed to perfection. Her skin, usually pale from working night shifts under fluorescent lights, had been buffed and highlighted to a porcelain glow. "It is time for the dress," the lead stylist, a severe French woman named Céline, announced. She snapped her fingers, and 2 assistants brought out a garment bag. When they unzipped it, the room seemed to absorb the light. It wasn't just a dress. It was a weapon. It was a custom Alexander McQueen, a deep, blood-red velvet that looked almost black in the shadows, but burned like embers under the light. It was off the shoulder, with a neckline that was daring but regal, and a slit that ran high up the thigh, allowing for movement, or running. "Your father commissioned this 3 years ago," Julian Thorne said, standing by the doorway, checking his watch. He said, "One day, Ellie will need to look like she's walking through fire." Wyatt touched the fabric. He knew. He always knew. She stepped into the dress. It fit like a second skin. When she stepped back into the mirror, the poor girl from the courtroom was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked like she could buy the courthouse and burn it down for sport. "One last thing," Thorne said. He opened a small velvet box. Inside lay a necklace, a choker of white diamonds with a center stone that was terrifyingly large, a rare red diamond the size of a quail egg. "The Heart of Oberon. It was your mother's. It hasn't been seen in public for 25 years. Wearing this sends a message to the board." "What message?" Wyatt asked, as Thorne fastened the cold, heavy gems around her neck. "That the Queen has returned," Thorne said. and she is not afraid. Kalen, the security chief, walked in. He was wearing a tuxedo now, though it did little to hide the bulk of the muscle beneath it or the dangerous scan of his eyes. He stopped when he saw Wyatt. For a split second, his professional mask slipped, revealing genuine shock. "The car is ready," Kalen said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "We have 4 teams on the perimeter at the Met. But listen to me, Ms. Vance. The ballroom is a kill box. Sightlines are everywhere. Stick to me. Do not take drinks from waiters we haven't vetted. Do not go to the restroom alone." "I understand," Wyatt said. She took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking. She looked at her hands, the hands that had scrubbed diner counters and changed her father's bedpans. She clenched them into fists. "Let's go," she said. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was a fortress of light. Flashbulbs popped like strobe lights, creating a wall of white noise. The red carpet was crowded with Hollywood stars, tech billionaires, and socialites. But when the black Maybach convoy pulled up, a hush fell over the crowd. Rumors travel fast in New York. The story of the courtroom drama had leaked. Page 6 had already run the headline, "The $1 trillion Cinderella." Everyone wanted to see the girl who had destroyed Marcus Sterling. The door opened. Kalen stepped out first, scanning the crowd with lethal intensity. He offered a hand into the dark cabin. Wyatt stepped out. The silence broke. The photographers went feral. "Wyatt! Wyatt! Look here! Is it true you were homeless? How much is the estate worth?" Wyatt didn't flinch. She remembered what Thorne had told her in the car. "Do not smile. Smiles are for friends. You have no friends here. You have subjects and enemies." She walked up the stairs with a cold, detached elegance. The red dress trailed behind her like a pool of blood. She looked directly into the cameras, her expression unreadable. Inside the great hall, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The air smelled of expensive champagne and fear. As Wyatt entered, the chatter stopped. Hundreds of heads turned. Lydia Blackwood wasn't there. She was likely meeting with bankruptcy lawyers. But Marcus Sterling was. He was standing near the bar, looking disheveled, frantically talking to a man who was clearly trying to get away from him. When Marcus saw Wyatt, he froze. The glass in his hand tilted, spilling champagne onto his shoes. Wyatt paused. She looked at Marcus. She didn't say a word. She just raised an eyebrow, touched the red diamond at her throat, and kept walking. "That was cold," Kalen murmured in her ear as they moved deeper into the room. "He tried to ruin my life," Wyatt whispered back. "He's lucky I only ruined his shoes." Thorne guided her toward a table in the center of the room. Seated there were 5 elderly men and women, the board of directors for the Vanguard Consortium. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thorne said smoothly, "may I present the majority shareholder, Ms. Wyatt Vance." The board members stood up. They looked skeptical. These were people who controlled economies. They looked at the 22-year-old girl with doubt. "Ms. Vance," the chairman, a man named Arthur Sterling, no relation to Marcus, thankfully, said stiffly, "We heard about the abrupt transition of power. These are turbulent times for the market. We were discussing a potential vote of no confidence until your probate is settled." This was the test. They wanted to see if she would panic. Wyatt looked at the chairman. She remembered her father's late-night rants about these men. "They are sheep, Ellie. They follow the shepherd who carries the biggest stick." "A vote of no confidence?" Wyatt asked, her voice calm and carrying well over the music. "Interesting, considering that my father's will explicitly states that in the event of a board rebellion, the Blackwood Trust is to liquidate all assets in Vanguard and move them to a charitable trust." The color drained from the chairman's face. "Liquidate? That would crash the stock. It would destroy the company. Then I suggest you have confidence, Arthur, Wyatt said, taking a glass of water from a passing tray. Because if you don't, I will burn this company to the ground before I let you take it from me. My father built it. I own it. Sit down. The chairman sat. The rest of the board followed. Thorne suppressed a smile. She was a natural, but the victory was short-lived. Brave words, a voice said from behind her. It was a voice like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. But Silas always did have a flair for the dramatic. I see he passed it down. Wyatt turned. Standing there were two men. They were identical twins, perhaps in their late 30s. They were devastatingly handsome, with slicked-back dark hair and eyes that were completely devoid of warmth. They wore matching tuxedos, but one wore a red pocket square, the other blue. The Vittorio brothers. Thorne stiffened. Calen stepped forward, interposing himself between Wyatt and the men. Easy, watchdog. The one with the red square laughed. We're just here to offer our condolences. Dante, Thorne said, his voice dropping to a warning growl. You are not on the guest list. We bought the event catering company an hour ago. Dante Vittorio smiled, showing perfect white teeth. So technically, we're the staff. And this is my brother, Luca. Luca, the one with the blue square, didn't smile. He was staring at Wyatt with an intensity that made her skin crawl. So this is the prodigy, Luca said softly. The girl who was scrubbing floors yesterday and wearing diamonds today. What do you want? Wyatt asked, keeping her voice steady despite the way Calen's hand was hovering near his jacket pocket. We want what is ours, Dante said, stepping closer. Calen put a hand on his chest to stop him. Dante looked at the hand, then at Calen. Touch me again, soldier, and you'll lose the arm. Try it, Calen challenged. Stop, Wyatt commanded. She stepped around Calen, facing Dante. Speak. Briefly. Dante's eyes glinted with amusement. Silas stole the code for the fiber optic network from our father 30 years ago. He built his empire on blood money, our blood. We offered him a deal to return it. He refused. And now, he's dead. Dante leaned in, his voice a whisper only she could hear. We don't want the money, Wyatt. We want the key. Give us the master drive, and you can keep your billions and your little play-pretend queen act. But if you don't give it to us... He looked around the glittering room. Accidents happen. Cars crash. Elevators fail. People disappear. Is that a threat? Wyatt asked. It's a forecast, Luca said. I don't know what a master drive is, Wyatt said honestly. But even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you. My father warned me about scavengers. He just didn't tell me they dressed so well. Dante's smile vanished. His face became a mask of cold fury. Wrong answer, little mouse. Dante reached into his pocket. Calen drew a concealed tactical baton instantly, snapping it open. The crowd nearby gasped, backing away. But Dante just pulled out a phone. He showed the screen to Wyatt. It was a live video feed. It showed the small, run-down apartment in Queens, where Wyatt's best friend, Sarah, lived. Sarah was the only person who had stuck by Wyatt during the hard times. On the screen, Sarah was tied to a chair, gagged. Two men in masks were standing behind her. Wyatt felt the world tilt. Sarah, you have 24 hours, Dante said, putting the phone away. Bring the master drive to the docks at Red Hook. Midnight tomorrow. Come alone. If you bring your watchdog here. He gestured to Calen. Sarah dies. You monster, Wyatt hissed. I'm a businessman, Dante shrugged. And you have a debt to pay. The brothers turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like ghosts. Wyatt grabbed Thorne's arm to steady herself. She felt like she was going to throw up. They have Sarah, she gasped. Thorn, they have Sarah. Thorn's face was pale. This is bad. The Vittorios don't bluff. If they have a hostage, they will kill her. We call the police, Wyatt said. No, Calen snapped. The Vittorios own the precinct in that district. You call the cops. Sarah is dead before they hang up the phone. Then what do we do? Wyatt cried. I don't even know what the master drive is. Thorn looked at Wyatt, his expression grim. I do, Thorn said. And I know why Silas hid it. It's not just code, Wyatt. It's a list of every corrupt politician, judge and crime lord Silas ever did business with. It's the leverage that kept him safe. If the Vittorios get it, they will blackmail half the world. I don't care about the world, Wyatt said. I care about Sarah. We have to get her back, Calen said, holstering his baton. But we do it my way. Your way? Wyatt asked. Calen looked at her. You said you wanted to be strong. Tonight was the dress rehearsal. Tomorrow is the war. We aren't going to the docks to trade. We are going to the docks to hunt. Calen tapped his earpiece. Team 1, bring the car around. We're leaving. And get me the inventory from the armory. The heavy inventory. Wyatt looked at the retreating backs of the Vittorio brothers across the room. The fear in her chest was hardening into something else. Something cold and sharp, like the diamond around her neck. She touched the necklace. Thorn, Wyatt said. You said my father left me an empire. Yes. Does that empire include mercenaries? Thorn paused, then nodded slowly. It includes private contractors. Yes. Hire them, Wyatt said, her eyes flashing with a dark fire. Hire them all. No one takes my family. The docks at Red Hook were a graveyard of rusted metal and shipping containers. The rain had turned into a torrential storm, masking the sound of the choppy water in the harbour. It was midnight. Wyatt stood alone under the sickly yellow light of a halogen street lamp. In her hand, she clutched a silver titanium hard drive case. You're late, a voice called out from the shadows. Dante and Luca Vittorio stepped out from behind a stack of crates. They weren't wearing tuxedos anymore. They were dressed in tactical black. Behind them, 2 massive bodyguards held Sarah. Wyatt's best friend was battered, duct tape over her mouth, eyes wide with terror. Let her go, Wyatt shouted over the wind. I have the drive. Drive first, Luca sneered, raising a handgun. Throw it. Wyatt hesitated. She looked at Sarah. She looked at the dark water churning at the edge of the pier. If I give you this, Wyatt said, her voice surprisingly steady, you disappear. You never touch my company, my friends, or my city again. Dante laughed. You're in no position to negotiate, little mouse. But sure, we'll vanish. We have bigger fish to fry once we have that list. Wyatt took a breath. She threw the silver case. It skidded across the wet concrete, stopping at Dante's feet. Dante picked it up eagerly. He pulled a tablet from his jacket, connected the drive, and waited. His eyes scanned the screen. It's decrypting, Dante grinned. This is it. Every dirty secret of the Western world. Wait, Luca frowned, looking at the tablet over his brother's shoulder. Why is the progress bar red? What? Dante tapped the screen. It's uploading. What is it doing? Wyatt took a step back. A cold smile touched her lips, the first genuine smile she had worn in days. It's not uploading a list, Dante, Wyatt said softly. It's uploading a rootkit virus into your personal cloud, and simultaneously broadcasting a live audio-video feed to the FBI Cybercrimes Division. Dante's head snapped up. What did you do? My father didn't use the master drive to hide crimes, Wyatt shouted, the thunder rolling above her. He used it to trap criminals. You just plugged a federal tracking beacon into your own network. Kill her! Dante screamed, dropping the tablet. Luca raised his gun. Click. The floodlights of the shipping yard suddenly blazed to life, blinding the brothers. From the top of the shipping containers, dark shapes descended on zip lines. It was Kaylin's team. They hit the ground with military precision. Thwip, thwip. 2 suppressed shots rang out. The bodyguards holding Sarah cried out, dropping to their knees as tranquilizer darts hit their necks. Sarah scrambled away, crawling toward Wyatt. "Ambush!" Luca yelled, firing blindly into the light. Kaylin emerged from the shadows like a wraith. He didn't use a gun. He moved inside Luca's guard, disarming him with a bone-crunching twist of the wrist, and slammed him into the side of a metal container. Luca slumped to the ground, unconscious. Dante, realizing he was outmatched, turned to run toward a waiting speedboat at the dock's edge. "Stop!" Wyatt screamed. She saw a discarded handgun on the ground. Luca's. Without thinking, she picked it up. She didn't know how to aim, she didn't know how to shoot, but she pointed it at Dante. "Don't make me do it!" she yelled. Dante stopped. He looked at the gun shaking in her hands. He sneered. "You don't have the guts. You're just a poor girl playing dress-up." He turned to jump into the boat. Bang! He didn't shoot. She didn't shoot. Kaylin had fired a single shot into the engine of the speedboat. The motor exploded in a fireball, sending Dante flying backward onto the pier, singed and stunned. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real police sirens. Kaylin walked over to Wyatt and gently took the gun from her shaking hands. "Good stance," he muttered, "but leave the shooting to the professionals." Wyatt ran to Sarah, ripping the tape off her mouth. They embraced in the rain, sobbing. "I thought I was dead," Sarah cried. "I thought you were just an antique dealer's daughter." Wyatt looked at the flashing lights of the police cars swarming the pier. She looked at Julian Thorne, who was stepping out of a black SUV with the police commissioner. She looked at the Vittorio brothers being handcuffed. "I am," Wyatt whispered. "But it turns out, antiques are worth a lot more than people think." 6 months later, the boardroom of Vanguard Consortium was silent. The sunlight streamed in through the glass walls, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Wyatt Vance sat at the head of the table. She wasn't wearing a ball gown, and she wasn't wearing rags. She wore a sharp, navy blue business suit. "The quarterly report is in," Wyatt said, looking at the board. "Profits are up 12%. The board members nodded respectfully. There were no more whispers, no more doubts. They had seen her dismantle a crime syndicate and restructure a global logistics network in half a year. "However," Wyatt continued, "we are making a change to the budget." She slid a file across the table. "We are liquidating the Oberon Luxury Housing Division. We are converting the assets into affordable housing trusts in Queens and the Bronx, specifically for families facing eviction due to medical bankruptcy." The board members looked at each other. A year ago, they would have laughed. "This will cost us billions in potential revenue," one member noted cautiously. "It will," Wyatt agreed. "But we have $1 trillion. We can afford to lose a few billion to buy back our soul." She stood up. Meeting adjourned. Later that afternoon, Wyatt visited a quiet cemetery in Brooklyn. She placed a single white rose on a modest gravestone. Silas Blackwood. He fixed things. "I did it, Dad," Wyatt whispered. "I didn't let them break me." She felt a presence behind her. It was Julian Thorne. "He would be proud," Thorne said. "You know, the Master Drive wasn't actually a virus." Wyatt turned to him. "I know. It was just a blank drive with a GPS tracker I bought at Best Buy. I bluffed." Thorne chuckled. "Silas always said the greatest weapon wasn't money. It was the ability to make your enemy believe you were bigger than you are." "What was actually on the real Master Drive?" Wyatt asked. "The one you hid in the vault?" Thorne smiled. recipes, hundreds of them, and photos of you growing up. That was his treasure, Wyatt. The rest, the money, the power, that was just the game. You were the prize. Wyatt looked back at the grave. She touched the diamond necklace she still wore beneath her shirt, the only reminder of the gala. She wasn't the poor girl anymore. She wasn't the victim. She was Wyatt Blackwood Vance, the queen of the glass fortress, and she had a lot of work to do. And that is the incredible story of Wyatt Vance. From being mocked in a courtroom for having $12 to her name, to inheriting $1 trillion empire and taking down the mob, it proves that you should never judge a book by its cover, or a girl by her shoes. Marcus Sterling lost his license. Lydia Blackwood is currently working as a hostess in a diner in Jersey. Ironic, isn't it? And Wyatt? She's proving that the best revenge isn't hatred. It's massive, undeniable success. What would you do if you found out your broke father was actually a secret billionaire? Would you keep the money, give it away, or seek revenge on everyone who wronged you? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and twists, please smash that like button, share this video with a friend who loves drama, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that sound like fiction. See you in the next video.